Lovely. Thanks, everyone. Okay, let's get started now then, and others can join us when they have time. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Rosie McKenzie. I'm the Senior Company Engagement Manager here in the Responsible Business team at Thomson Reuters Foundation. Welcome to this Responsible Business webinar on the just transition, where we are looking to unpack how companies are actually defining, governing, and implementing a just transition, and evolving laws and corporate practices. So a quick look at the agenda. So I'm doing a little introduction now, and what we're aiming to do is provide a comprehensive overview of the just transition, drawing on TRF's latest research into how companies are governing it. Before the conversation starts, Polly Marsh, our Research and Campaigns Manager, will provide a brief overview of the report, which has been published, and we will send you a link in the chat, after which we'll hand over to our wonderful panel, whose names are here, and you can see some of their faces on the screen now. I'll let them introduce themselves at that stage, and they'll be discussing how companies are communicating and implementing the just transition. There will be a chance for a Q&A at the end, so you can send your questions whenever you like through the Q&A function, and we'll get to them at the end. Or obviously, keep them for the actual Q&A bits, whichever you prefer to do as an attendee. But thank you so much for joining us for this really important dialogue where together we can foster a more equitable and inclusive future for all. Lovely. I'll hand over to Polly to give us a bit of background. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, Rosie. Thanks, Rosie. Thank you so much. And yet, I will not speak for very long because this is an amazing panel that we've got lined up, so I will move everyone quite quickly onto that. But we did want to just give a brief overview of our newly published report into navigating the just transition, which focuses particularly on the experience of businesses in South Asia. So essentially what the report does is synthesize global reporting frameworks and leverages case studies kind of from Asian businesses to international businesses to different organizations, trying to offer practical guidance for companies, investors, policymakers, sustainability leaders, and other stakeholders on how to really put people at the core of the transition to net zero. So just as a bit of kind of context, we do define the just transition as pursuing net zero in ways that create greener jobs without leaving people behind. So it puts people at the center by embedding human rights, protecting livelihoods, and ensuring that workers can access the skills and opportunities that come from a low carbon economy. It is no secret, obviously, that climate impacts and energy transitions are disrupting jobs today and the job market, which makes it really, really urgent that safeguards are introduced for workers and communities to make sure that no one is left behind. However, we did find in the interviews that we carried out and the desk research that we did that there does still lack a common practical understanding of what the just transition actually is, and that this differs across different regions and sectors. Too often, climate and social strategies are deployed separately, with not enough measuring frameworks looking at the intersection between the two. We also found that transition data gaps persist due to a limited sort of standardized reporting framework. And more than that, we did sort of in our interviews find that still the concept of the just transition can be perceived as somewhat as a Western import, with kind of European buyers and investors, for example, operating with a more standardized and developed concept of what the just transition is, and kind of pushing those expectations onto their upstream suppliers who are already dealing with a very difficult context and a very different on the ground setup. So that kind of intersect has led to compliance burdens and inconsistent reporting. And Rosie, if we just hop on to the next slide, it focuses a little bit more on the experience of companies in South Asia in particular. The supplier reality there is that most companies are small or mid-sized firms. They're operating on thin margins and sometimes have limited in-house ESG capacity. They are facing simultaneous pressure from buyers and investors to cut costs, decarbonize operations, and to demonstrate progress on the just transition. and are expected to do this all with sometimes limited staff, time and budget to allow for new systems to collect social data, essentially. And often the kind of westernized standard reporting templates frequently overlook regional realities, such as high level of informal workforce, multi-tier contracting, and yes, sort of limited infrastructure on reporting on such things. So essentially what our report focuses on is this disconnect and the ways in which these outcomes can be improved. So some examples of that are that buyers should ground their expectations and support in regional realities by helping to co-design definitions, metrics and timelines with local industry bodies such as unions and NGOs, so that requirements actually reflect supplier contexts, including things like informality of workforce, language, data availability and access to training. It's obviously incredibly important that a worker-centric approach to the just transition and the green transition is sort of prioritized in order for companies to maintain a social license. So yeah, we are going to share the report after this in our follow-up email, and we really encourage you to download it and have a look at it. We think that there are some really useful tips for companies in there, and it does provide just a very kind of broad overview of what we view as the kind of critical issues with the just transition at the moment. So yes, that was a super quick, high level look at the report, and I think we will move straight on to the panel discussion now. So yes, I shall hand to Elisa, who is going to host the panel conversation.
Thank you so much, Polly. Thank you so much for the very interesting introduction with very important insights. I'm Elisa Benistans-Remigach. I'm a technical officer for Just Transition for the International Labour Organization based in Bangladesh. Just Transition is a core priority of the ILO globally, but in Bangladesh, it is even more urgent given that it's one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. I'm joined today by a great panel that is also very diverse. So I hope that they will also bring very different perspective. So first, Abil bin Amin, Executive Director of ETI Bangladesh, that has over a decade of experience in responsible business conduct, as well as Audrey Clevedon, Head of ESG Leadership and Consulting in SIDEX, a company that provides data, insights, and advisory to companies to promote responsible business practices and sustainability across supply chain. And Mashouk Mujib Chowdhury, Senior Manager in Sustainability from DBL Group, that is a multi-sector corporation, a Bangladeshi corporation, and that is deeply engaged also in women economic empowerment. So that's a great panel. And without further ado, I first want to ask a question to Abil. And also feel free to introduce yourself in more details if needed. But Abil, drawing on ETI's work with companies and social partners, how are businesses in Bangladesh and globally defining what a just transition means in practice? And also, how are those definitions being embedded into company strategies, particularly as they're responding to regulations, but also they have to respond to some global climate goals? Over to you, Abil. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Elisa, and good afternoon or good evening to the participants who have joined. I'm assuming it's from different parts of the world. So I'm, as introduced earlier, I'm Abil bin Amin. I'm working as the Executive Director of Ethical Trading Initiative Bangladesh. So for those who are not aware, Ethical Trading Initiative, in short, we call it ETI. It's a multi-stakeholder membership-based organization. We have three kinds of members: business, international trade unions, and international NGOs. And most of our members are based in Europe. So the perspective that I would be sharing today would be mostly from the European side. So based on the question, if you look at how European brands are looking at the just transition, most of the European brands are responding to just transition by adopting to the European Green Deal and the European Deforestation Act. So these are the two big regulations that are driving their growth. Under the European Green Deal, there are 4 key objectives, but for today's discussion, the 2 main objectives that are relevant is achieving net zero greenhouse emission by 2050 and also ensuring a just and inclusive transition so that no person or region is left behind. So the no person or region is left behind is the key part of the just transition work that is driving the European brands. And we are seeing that when the European brands are developing their both climate and social strategies, so these are the 2 regulations they are referring to. At the same time, when on the climate side, where the targets are quite clear, focusing on both achieving net zero and also reducing pollution on multiple front, water, air, solid waste, liquid waste. But the second objective, leaving no one behind, is not really included as a holistic strategy. It's more covered under the social strategy, which focus more on human rights due diligence and social aspects. So there is, in practice, we see that there is a gap. And often we see, especially for the bigger brands, that there are 2 separate teams. They're implementing the 2 strategies, and there's little coordination between these 2 teams as well. So often we see that there's a disjoint, that a lot of work is happening to ensure transition, but the just part is often missing. Similarly, if we filter it down at country level, most of the businesses are responding to the targets set by the brands. As a result, because what is happening is again then, so they are also doing a lot to ensure net zero and also reduce their carbon footprint and reduce pollution. But often in their local business strategy, the just part is often missing. It is again, and if it is there, it's again in the social part. Again, the disjoint is quite clear. We have been working with our members on this for the last 4 years, actually. We are supporting them to actually pilot various initiatives and developing their capacity, how to better understand it. But I'm afraid that the definition of just transition is still not clear. It's still something a bit of a work in progress. Among the social partners, because we also have social partners, as was said earlier, in ETI membership, we also have international trade unions and international NGOs. And similarly, in Bangladesh as well, we are also working with social partners. And a big part of that had been toward lobby advocacy with the government to ensure that this also reflects into our local laws. Even though it is equality and equity is mentioned in our constitution in Bangladesh, it doesn't reflect into any of the laws and regulations that holds the businesses accountable. For the first time, the recommendations that were prepared by the Labour Reform Commission earlier this year, they promoted the just transition principles or the framework that can be adopted by the government and ensure that the voices of the workers and the communities that are affected is included. I'm happy to say in the NDC 3 that was published last week, the government actually included that. Now it's still early stage, it's still a policy level thing. How it will be implemented and adopted going forward is yet to be seen. But that is the stage that we are at the moment. That at least that conversation is starting, but still a lot of unpacking left to be done, and sort of collaboration and cooperation needs to be required to make sure that the transition happens in a just manner. So that's from my side. Alice, over to you.
Thank you so much, Adil, and indeed, I mean, like the key points that I take from your intervention, and also after Audrey or Mashouk, please complement if there is anything that you would like to add from the private sector side, but also from maybe other good examples that we may have. But simply to say that what I found really interesting is that indeed you're saying that basically climate and the social component are taken in two separate ways, when we should actually really take them as like complementary, but even like supporting each other. So that's like the first point, and that's really what makes the transition just. And the second point is indeed just transition has been embedded in the last version of the NDCs of Bangladesh, and really Bangladesh shows leadership. It's the first country in Asia actually that has a dedicated chapter for it. But indeed now we need to go from commitment to implementation. And ILO is actively working on this, and we're really happy to work with any partner. So we will follow up also on this later. But first, Mashouk or Audrey, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Elisa. And yeah, Abil, I think like it definitely resonates with what we are seeing at CEDEX. And I will probably introduce myself in a second, but like what I wanted to add on the regulation side is that we're seeing that as well with, for example, CSRD. So if we look at like the climate transition plan, and the way of reporting, you are being asked to report on E1, which is like a specific section looking only at the environment. And if you want to scope in the human rights, then it's very segregated. So again, like we are yet to see a joint approach on how do we disclose information, how do we join partnership and really solidify the effort together.
Thank you so much. Mashouk, do you want to come in?
Just briefly, yes, I do agree with Abil Bhai that one of the important parts, because we've been constantly bombarded with different terms every now and then. So initially we thought that, okay, are we the only one who's not understanding just transition properly? No, we see that more or less everyone is in the particular case, or about the proper definition of it. Yes, we do understand it, and Abil Bhai has cleared it, that we're talking about climate justice and social justice at the same time. Not that at the expense of climate, we're losing the society. In the sense that we have to reduce carbon emissions, yes, but at the same time, we are not talking about shutting down factories, because that's mass, employment problem definitely will be there. Mass unemployment will be there. So yes, that particular, so to say, the handshake needs to be there. That's the idea of sustainability in overall, social aspects, environmental aspects, and profit as well, and economic aspect as well. Agree with it.
Exactly. I mean, how do we ensure that all stakeholders are, understand, we have a knowledge of people's priorities, but then also how do they receive the adequate support so that workers can go through the transition, but also enterprises, so that job continuum being created, modes of production change, etc., etc. So fully agree, it needs to be a really holistic approach. Thank you so much. Now I would like to go to Audrey to ask a question about the fact that, CEDEX supports hundreds of companies across different sectors and regions. What are the most common sticking points when companies start implementing a just transition in their supply chains? And what concrete first steps or tools have proven most effective to move from commitment to action? So that relates to also what we were saying just now on the NDCs, ensuring that people outcomes advance alongside climate objectives. Over to you, Audrey.
Thanks, Elisa. So just to step back a bit, I would like to just give a short introduction to CEDEX for those who don't know our company, but we are a global business. We are a tech platform that supports thousands of businesses globally on responsible sourcing. We really support members of our community to map complex supply chain, assess human rights and environmental risk together, and really make decision based on data that actually inform the sourcing practices. You will probably know us through SMETA, who is our audit methodology mostly used across the globe. I'm very interested in that discussion today, and it's probably going to be redundant since I know that Abil, you've just mentioned that, and Polly, you've mentioned that as well in your intro. But I think one of the biggest sticking points we are seeing in making a successful business case for just transition is really the lack of integration between the procurement team, the human rights team, and environmental team. What we are seeing amongst the businesses we work with is that they often work in silo rather than end to end together. And probably one of the reasons behind that is that if you're going to have a powerful climate strategy in your supply chain, most of the time those hotspot impact are happening in the deep of the like in the depth of the supply chain, when what we're seeing is that human rights team tend to focus probably at tier 1 or tier 2. So like first of all, they don't really operate in the same scope, so the work doesn't necessarily overlap. The good news is that the trend we're seeing at SEDEX is more and more of the company we work with want to have a joint approach. So if they look at human rights impact, they will also map the hotspot, let's say, on the decarbonization project that they are putting in place, to really like do a materiality assessment that actually account for both the human right and environmental aspect. I think those teams need to end together and also align on priorities, because lots of the times they have conflicting priorities internally. We lack data, and that means that it's hard to get started or know where to start. What we recommend businesses is actually to start with risk assessment that really look at both the environmental impact or the hotspot in the climate project that a company wants to put in place, and overlap that with human rights risk. And I think like as a first step, that gives you like a solid approach of like where to prioritize your action, because you're never going to be able to cover everything just in once. I think sometimes we are seeing a governance issue as well, like, you know, where does that topic belong in a supply chain, in the value chain, like who own the just transition topic. And I think like if we take that within a business internally, again, we have that conflicting priority of like who own that topic, and how do we actually make sure that that topic is integrated in every part and every action of like what we're doing in the operational side. That's pretty much what we are seeing from our side. So there is really much this increased appetite, interest to really like bring forces together, but I would say it's not quite systemic just yet.
Thank you so much. And I think it really resonates also with what Abil was saying, is that, again, we need integration across the different departments within an enterprise, but even across the supply chain, looking even at like beyond tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I mean, as an ILO staff, also to also highlight the fact that labor rights are human rights. And I'm sure that everyone is aware here. So that's also really what, I mean, ILO is supporting to look at across the supply chain. I'm wondering if Abil and Mashuk want to also complement with their own experience. It seems like it's okay. So thank you so much. Now I would like to, Abil, you unmuted yourself. Do you want to come in?
Yes, just wanted to add one thing. Sorry,
over
I
to you.
got disconnected for a
Sure,
second.
sure.
So mainly just want to echo and do a bit deeper on something that Audrey picked on, is on the purchasing practice part. This is such a critical issue that in a stage where there is so much is being asked from the factories, from the production countries, to make all these investments, and also to ensure all these are being done in a just manner. But the resources has to follow those targets and requests as well. So in a competitive world where the prices are going down in a constant manner, with brands taking a more of an equal responsibility and investing in the factories, it will be very difficult for the factories in Bangladesh, not only Bangladesh, but in other production countries as well, to actually achieve all these targets and ensure the that it's being done in a fair and equitable manner.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, indeed, not pushing the responsibility and all the cost to the factories would be something, and have a shared responsibility is really something that needs to be built on. Thank you so much, and I think that it really resonates also with Mashuk. So now I would like to ask a question to you. DPL Group is deeply engaged with workers, trade unions, and local communities, especially women, across its operation, and its work now extends well beyond traditional sustainability. What have you learned from the engagement, and how has this reshaped the company's direction towards creating shared social value and long-term climate resilience? Over to you.
Thank you very much. So just briefly about myself. So I'm Mashuk Chaudhary. I've been working with DPL Group for 12.5 years now. So quite enough time within the industry, not as experienced as Abil Bhai or Chaudhary, but still it's there. So basically, essentially, I'm working with stakeholder engagement and sustainability reports, CDP reports, and more of the program coordination side as well. So within these particular 12.5 years, in this, although I've been only in DPL Group, but there has been constant transitions that we have seen. And whether it be just or not, that what we will see it in a little while. If you're talking about women, one of the initiatives that we have is our own women empowerment program. What we, in our RMG factories, in our apparel manufacturing factories, we have the female supervisor leadership program. So that is a particular program where we are training our own workers so that they can become become female supervisors, and even we have female line chiefs now. So the advantage is it's an in-house program. So there's both soft skills, but both technical skills as well. So because if the soft skills are required for them to explain in a proper way to the other workers and everything, and of course the technical skills because they have to know all the whole processes together. And this particular program actually aligns with Just Transition in the sense that when we're talking about, when we're referring to Just Transition, it's not that overnight we're changing every machines and the next day workers come in and they say everything is automation. That's not possible because no matter independent of the size of the factories or the size of the companies, it is going to require some sort of a time, some sort of a transition time. So within that particular thing, so as we have engagement with our workers, we have participatory committee meetings, and then of course we have engagement with the trade unions as well. Our workers are fully free to join any trade union, and these connections, and also, for example, within the local communities, we have good relations within because essentially our workers are living within the community. So the key idea of stakeholder engagement over here is that anytime a transition or any new thing is coming or any knowledge sharing, whether it be health issues, whether it be more technical issues, so we do have that particular interaction. For example, if we take the case of female supervisors, one worker who was not familiar with all the processes, a female supervisor, after going through the trainings, they themselves are operating on the computers themselves and then finding out, okay, no, this production can be done in this way and such and such. So they are giving ideas on the floor because they have been empowered like that. So that really helps. In that particular case, when we're talking about Just Transition, when we're talking about, for example, procuring newer machineries, more energy efficient machineries, so we can easily train up the female supervisors that this is a new technology that's coming in. So you teach your workers, your line workers accordingly as well. As they have the interaction already, and they've gone through formalized trainings in-house. So the interactions will help them, understand it better as well. So to say, the panic initially is there that machines are going to take over. I mean, we still live in movie world in certain cases as well. But what we've seen, even with the examples that we generally share about generative AI, so that itself has severe amounts of limitations as well. I mean, the conversations that we're having in this panel discussion or one-on-one, so we can easily understand that, okay, what we're meaning. But for Gen AI, that's going to take a long time to understand because they tend to forget and everything. So the immediate transition to everything automatic and everything, that's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take itself a long time. So we do have that particular time. And when, in fact, for that matter, when computers themselves came in, so it's not that overnight people lost their jobs, but there was a constant skill development. Skill development is something which we'll be needing all the time as well. So as we have already the female supervisor leadership program, we have industry-based training centers as well. The advantage of industry-based training centers is that the workers themselves are interacting directly within the factory premises, interacting with the different machines and everything. So it's not something in an isolated training center, but it's within the factory houses, the factory complexes. So these are the things that are going to help people go through the just transition. As just transition is not just talking about installing solar panels, because solar panels are relatively more static. It's not replacing jobs in that particular case. But there are advantages as well. For example, idea of recycling. When we are talking about we're creating yarns and garments from recycled materials. So that means we are having a recycling plan. We have a recycling plan. That's actually creating more jobs. It's just that the idea of just transition is that we will be equipping skills, or we need to equip the relevant skills to our workers so that they can just push and modify themselves, not losing their jobs, but learning a new skill and slowly going towards another particular, whether it be another industry or another industry that complements the RMGs or other industries. So this is the idea of just transition that we are working with currently.
Thank you so much, Meshuk. And again, I find it really interesting. I mean, indeed, transition don't happen in a day. And indeed, I mean, it really shows that, I mean, of course, it requires investment in infrastructure, of course, you know, for greener practices, but also more productive in new technologies, etc. But also in people. And that's really what you focused on, and that I found really interesting. And for investing in people comes through stakeholder engagement, so community engagement, etc., but also building the right skills. And I think that something that is quite interesting is that you need to develop both, of course, green skills, but also around automation, also around soft skills, etc., to make sure that we manage to go smoothly through those transitions so that they work for both enterprise and people. So thank you so much for this. Abil, Audrey, do you want to come in and complement with a few points?
I'm happy to jump in and provide a different perspective while still echoing what's been said. I think, like, for someone starting a responsible sourcing program, I would absolutely agree that the gender data is going to be key to actually give like an accurate picture of what's going on. With just transition, what we're seeing is in the supply chain, most of the time, women tend to be more vulnerable. And if you don't have the data to capture this risk, you can't actually address it or like plan for it. So I would say, like, it starts with the data and collecting the gender disaggregated impact data would actually support like impact assessment as well as risk provision.
Thank you so much. Abil, do you want to go?
It's just
Meshuk.
one particular thing. Thank you, Audrey, for saying that. We have done an in-house study which shows something interesting as well. The female supervisors, they are 3.33 percentage points more efficient than the male supervisors. So we're already having women who are having this extra special skills, as because they've gone through formalized trainings and everything. So these are the ones that actually do have, but we do agree, yes. Further data collection. I mean, for example, if you're working with research organizations, whether it be other universities as well, so they can have that particular, very specific data specific approach. And even, yes, of course, with ETI, with SEDEX, we can work further as well. That, and when we talk about stakeholder engagement, we are not talking about just one or two types of organizations, but the field is open for data group. So these are the ones which help us stay ahead as well, and which can help the industry stay ahead as well.
Thank you so much. Abil, I see that you're unmuted. Over to you.
Just wanted to add a little bit with Meshuk bhai. So similar to just transition, we often struggle to define stakeholder engagement as well. Different people will define it differently. Someone will speak with maybe one stakeholder and say that they have completed their responsibility. Other will do a more thorough job. And it was interesting that this is something that was also covered by EU CSDDD. It's not yet published yet, but that they talked about as part of the due diligence process, meaningful stakeholder engagement being a key step for due diligence process. So it's very also important that we also agree on the common definition of stakeholder engagement. So we have done some work on this. We have a framework and some toolkit around meaningful stakeholder engagement. If anyone is interested to know more, please reach out to me. I can share that. But again, this would lead to more alignment. The Some of the problem is that different people are defining different things slightly differently, which often leads to a lot of misunderstanding inside the industry.
Thank you so much, Abil. And I think that you can even share it with the Thomson Reuters Foundation, and then we can share with everyone because I think everyone is interested. So thank you so much. And I think that with that, we're done with the conversation, and we also would like to open for a few questions. I'm wondering, so I see a few questions in the chat, so happy to read some of them, but also wondering if some people would like to take the floor to ask the question. But maybe I will just start with one of them. So the first one is, what are the first steps a company should take to begin just transition planning if it starts from scratch? I think, Audrey, you already started touching on it about, first starting with basically a risk assessment. I'm wondering if you want to complement to respond to this question, and if others would like to come in.
Yeah, absolutely. What a very good question. I think the risk assessment will be like step one. Aside that, it will start with like establishing governance internally. So really like who's gonna own the topic? Like, is that gonna be your chief procurement officer, your chief sustainability officer? But make sure that someone has ownership of the topic so that you can then from there establish the relevant policy to cascade it down.
Great point. Thank you so much. Extremely practical. Mashouk, Abil, do you want to also complement? If not,
Maybe
I will
just
go
very
to...
quickly.
Yeah.
Just to compliment Audrey, I would just recommend that follow the 5 steps of the HRDD processes. The step 1 is follows more around having internal strategies and policies. Then step 2 is comes the risk assessment. So if you follow the steps, that will actually help you, because there are a lot of guidelines and toolkits out there that help guide companies to do exactly that, following the 5 steps.
Thank you so much. Then the second question is, how should companies approach measuring the just transition if they're a service-based company without many emissions? I'm wondering who should respond to this.
I'm happy to jump in. What we are seeing at SEDEX is historically we had our various tools, and recently we had created what we call the service provider risk assessment, and that was in response to exactly that type of question. So how do we assess when there is low emission, and how do we join the dot together? So that service provider risk assessment is actually adapted to that situation. It's been launched quite recently, so we are currently processing the data, but we are seeing like a very interesting uptake from the industry of services into that tool and services.
Thank you so much. I guess I'll go to the third question, except if Mashouk or Abil, you would like to come in. But so the third question is, what are the leading international standards for measuring and disclosing just transition outcomes, and how do they compare?
Well, I'll jump in for one
Yes.
little point. I mean, as the concept itself is quite new, I think it's going to be an evolving thing. So that's going to be there. Unless there's a proper definition of just transition, these things will be taken down. But essentially, if you're talking about, for example, breaking it out into climate issues and human rights issues. So for human rights issues, we have the UNGPs, UN Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights. So that can be a good starting point to understand. I mean, we were talking about step by step. I mean, essentially, if you talk about how we started with our sustainability reports, we have been reporting with the GRI standards, the Global Reporting Initiative, and recently we have for the last 4 reports, SASB standards have been started as well. So it's 2 standards are there. But what we did in the very first report is that we started, reporting on the minimum parts. and then we have constantly evolved of it. So if we are talking about if there's a guidebook on just transition, it's what we can recommend is not to go for everything at the same time, but rather let's start with the, so to say, the low-hanging fruits over here, the low-hanging fruits of just transition. We start with that, and then we can, as we understand it further, then we can move to the medium and the higher ones as well. So that's the input that I can share, if anyone else can.
Thank you so much. And actually, I can also complement a little bit, but also ILO has guidelines that were released in 2015 on just transition. And so for us, there are guidelines that are directed towards the government, the employers, and the workers. So, I mean, the essential standard and principle is really to have to ground just transition in social dialogue. So ensure that it's a participatory process, and again that it is also balanced in terms of priorities and way forward. But then we're really looking at several aspects from skills to social protection to enterprise support, employment policies, etc., etc. So it's a really holistic approach, and of course, it's grounded in ILO International Labor Standards. And I'm wondering if Abil, you want to come in? You seem ready to come in and complement.
No, actually, nothing from my side. You have actually covered dialogue. I was actually about to refer to that as well.
Excellent. Okay, I think that there's a new question that just came in. Do you recommend that one board member is held responsible for delivering a just transition, or should it be a whole board initiative? I think that goes to you, Audrey.
Interesting. I think back to how sustainability is set up today, and it's very much like owned by one person, because you need to have that type of ownership. But it's still so crucial that actually we work in partnership with the entire business ecosystem, and that sustainability is integrated into mostly like every role in a business. And so I see that being no different for just transition. So yes, I would recommend that like one person own it, but still it's being embedded across the business at various levels. And that comes with training, upskilling, education as well on the topic. We just mentioned the framework and great on the ILO Just Transition framework. I think another one that I wanted to mention was the Just Transition Task Force. That is an interesting one as well. That I think is very UK-centric at the moment, but probably will expand. And yeah, I think like by really having that person that own the topic, that really give that accountability, which is crucial to make sure that we keep that in mind when pushing for climate action.
Thank you so much. And when you were speaking about the task force, actually ILO is advocating and supporting the government in establishing a tripartite task force for just transition to try to monitor and steer the efforts on just transition. So hopefully more to come on this. But thank you so much. I think that we are done with the question and also right on time to finish. So I'm wondering if I should hand over back to Rosie.
Thank you, Elisa. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. That was a fantastic panel discussion. I definitely learned a lot, so I'm sure our audience did as well. I'm just going to flash up one final slide so people can get in touch if they want to, and also find the report. I did share the individual link to the report, but if you want to go and have a look at our other resources as well, you can find it there. And we will send, as we've mentioned on the call, we will send around all the resources that have been mentioned in a follow-up email as well. Yes, so thank you so much to all our panel. That was really, really fantastic. And thank you so much to all our audience for joining us. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.